What if the book you have been thinking about writing isn't just something you publish, but something that can open doors, build credibility, grow your business, and connect you with an entirely new audience? Our guest today is Jennifer Bright, a publishing expert with more than 3 decades of experience across virtually every aspect of the publishing industry. Through our publishing company, Bright Communications, Jennifer and her team publish more than 40 books every year, spanning everything from fiction and non-fiction to children's books and adult titles. She's also the creator of The Traveling Publisher, where she shares publishing service, stories, and insights while traveling the country in an ROV. Today, we're talking about whether everyone really has a book in them, how to choose the right publishing path, what makes a book commercially successful, and how can entrepreneurs use a book to build their business and authority. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for this opportunity. How are you today?
I'm good, Jennifer. Thank you so much. So, you have worked on thousands of books over more than 30 years. What separates the people who actually finish and publish their books from those who spend years saying, I have a book in me?
Oh, so it's like the great divide, right? I have had the experience in my decades of working in publishing that it's almost universal. Almost every single person that I meet, when they hear what I do, they say to me, oh, let me tell you about my book, or they say that they have a book idea. It is so universal that I have conversations like this with the person who's unloading my car at the thrift store, to my dental hygienist, to the person on the phone with the insurance company. Literally, it's almost 100%. But the difference between those people who say they would like to publish a book or have a book idea and the actual percentage of people who actually does publish a book, which I think is less than 1%. It's a really great divide, and that's a really important divide. And I think that to answer your question of what differentiates those two people, it's simply commitment and the wanting to do it, wanting to do it badly enough to dedicate resources, because it takes a lot of resources to publish a book, right? It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of confidence. And it takes a lot of, honestly, sacrificing other areas of your life. And so those are a lot of factors to consider. And I think that's why so many people, almost everybody wants to do a book, but really so few do.
Oh, thank you so much, Jennifer. So, how should someone decide whether their idea is actually a book and what kind of book it should become?
So that's a very good question. I think I hear you saying if someone would like to publish a book, what kind of book should they publish? And I think that there's two really important factors to consider. The one really important factor to consider is to publish something that your heart is in, right? Don't just publish a book because you want to publish a book. Publish a book about something that you're passionate about, something that you know about, something that maybe you really have a heart to help other people about. And that could be fiction too. Like, you might know about fiction. You might have a heart to share a story. The other, though, important thing is to publish something that that you have a good chance of selling. So what you should do if you're considering publishing a book and you're kind of thinking of like, what kind of book should it be? Take some time, take yourself to your favorite bookstore or go online to your favorite online bookstore and see what's out there in that category. So for instance, if you think to yourself, I really have a heart to publish a book about surviving pregnancy. Well, you might want to consider the fact that there's a lot of company there. And so if you want to do that, how can you identify and carve out a niche that's going to make your book different and special? The far easier road to success is to find something more unique, something different. So I actually just worked with an amazing author in Florida. Her name is Monica Stevens, and she published a book called The Rhythm of Rescue. It's a history of CPR. She is actually a CPR instructor. She's a nurse. She's an expert in this field. And she shares the history of CPR, but also some of her memoir and her story, but also interviews and profiles and tips and stories about leading companies in the industry. As far as we could tell, she literally published the first book that's a history of CPR. And now that's identifying a niche.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. So, What are some of the biggest mistakes aspiring authors make that end up costing them time, money, or credibility?
Ooh, good question. So I have some real heartbreaking stories, and I think that um, the biggest thing mistake authors make is number one, thinking they can do it all themselves and that it's not going to cost them anything. People like to say, oh, I'm just going to self publish my book and do it myself. Well, can you? Sure. Should you? Maybe not. It's like that old expression, a lawyer who represents herself has a fool for a client, right? So I met an author many years ago. This gentleman actually worked for a publisher for many years. He wasn't in the editorial department. I think he was like in the finance department or something, but he worked for a publisher. He told me that he spent 2 years and $20,000 self-publishing his book. And my heart just sank because I thought to myself, I could have helped him for a fraction of the time and a fraction of that money, and it would have been so much easier on him and so much more fun, because that's something that's really important to me is we have enough drudgery in our lives. If you're going to publish a book, it should be fun. The other mistake people make, and this is kind of related because the reason he spent so much time and so much money is he needed to hire some help, which most people who self-publish do. They're not literally going to do their cover themselves. They're not literally going to edit their books themselves. They're going to hire somebody. You're kind of like the general contractor for your book, right? Well, the problem is when you're self-publishing, you don't have a Rolodex full of contacts, right? You don't really even know how much you should be paying for things. And so I think that he ended up overpaying for a lot of things because he just didn't know. And that brings me to my second story. And the second thing I really caution people about is if you're going to hire someone to publish your book, really please do your homework. Ask for references, look for other books that they've published, really screen them well, review the contract clearly. What exactly are you getting for this? I had an author who, so sadly, we had met many years before, but she hired another person did the same. She hired a publishing company that she had found online, thinking she was getting a good deal and a good value. They didn't really do very much at all for her book. They didn't edit the book. They just pretty much published it was how it was. It was riddled with mistakes. She was heartbroken. And then she ended up hiring me to republish the book, which puts you in a really big kind of quandary because now you got two versions of your book. All your friends and family probably went out and bought the first version of your book. So now are they going to buy the second version too? It's just really problematic. So really, really, really do your homework.
Okay. So a lot of entrepreneurs see a book as a way to establish authority. How can a business owner turn a book into an actual business asset rather than simply having their name on a cover?
Absolutely. So I think I advise my authors from the very beginning, consider your book as your business. Even if you don't have a business yet, even if you're publishing a novel, your book is your business. And so I advise authors to treat it that way. Think of this as a business and approach it in that way. How can you use your book to support yourself and make money and vice versa? And, here in the United States, I'm not an accountant, so talk to your accountant, but there's a lot of tax benefits to having your own business. And so talk to your accountant about, would it be wise to have a business structure instead of just publishing this, as yourself? Now, the other case, though, is a lot of authors already have a business, and those are really smart authors who see the benefit to publishing a book to actually boosting their business. And this is something that I see quite often. Somebody has a business, they publish a book, then now your book is supporting your business and your business is supporting your book, and you create this wonderful flywheel effect that you're getting exponential results. Because at the end of the day, we have a wonderful expression here that is, if someone wrote the book on it, that means that he is the expert. And so just by publishing a book, that really establishes you as the expert in the topic. And so I think I heard the end of your question, correct me if I didn't hear correctly, something about the cover. And sometimes an author will even put like a little couple words of a bio underneath their name on the front cover. For example, maybe like if an author was a midwife and she published a book about parenting and pregnancy, she might write, she might have her degree, certified nurse midwife, but she also might say, a practicing midwife or for three decades or whatever to even clearly establish her as the expert.
Wonderful. Jennifer, thank you so much. I think you need that particular question right on the spot. So everyone wants to write a bestseller. These days, it's as if getting a New York bestseller is very, very easy. There are a lot of books right now I see, and they are New York bestseller. So what does it realistically take to create a book that sells? And what misconceptions do people have about becoming a best-selling author?
Well, that's a really good question. And then it comes to a lot of things that something I talk about a lot, which is confidence and an author's mindset. I see this all the time. My authors vacillate between total confidence that they have this amazing, wonderful book idea that's going to sell gazillions of copies. They're going to be on the New York Times bestseller list. And then they swing completely in the other direction to suffering from severe imposter syndrome. Oh, this is a terrible book. What was I thinking? I shouldn't even be allowed to write. Nobody's going to buy this book. Nobody's going to read this book. And then a piece of it that I think is not often talked about or understood is a lot of authors actually develop a fear and self-sabotage themselves because they're so afraid that someone might get their book, read their book, find a mistake, discover them to be a fraud, and expose them as a fraud, that they actually don't really promote and support their books because they're so afraid of being successful, right? It's this terrible, terrible, terrible loop. And so there's just so many positives, though, that I talk to my authors about. Number one, if you want to be a best-selling author, the most important thing that you need to do is to create and publish a great book, right? Create and publish the highest quality, best edited, awesomest cover. If you want a book that is going to sell, you need to publish a book that will sell. And so I know not everybody has a budget to hire a full publishing package, full publishing company. And, traditional publishing deals are rare as hen's teeth, as they used to say. And so what does someone who has more of a modest budget, what do they do? So I always tell people, if you have a smaller budget, but you still want to produce a top quality book that gives you the best chance of selling a lot of copies. And we're going to get to the bestseller term in a bit here, but let's just say selling a lot of copies. You should put your money in two places. Number one, hire a professional editor. It really makes a difference. Everyone needs an editor. Even an editor needs an editor. Writers who think that they can write it and edit it themselves, no. And writers who think I'm going to have my high school English teacher or my neighbor down the street or my friend who reads a lot of books or the librarian downtown. I'm going to ask them to edit my book. Well, there's a place for that, sure. And, that's lovely if they want to help you. And please thank them in your acknowledgments and give them a free copy of the book. But that's not editing. That's more something I would call beta reading, which is giving you opinions, giving you advice. The value of a professional editor just cannot be understated because I think a lot of authors don't realize that professional editors do so many things. There's many stages of editing. There's so many different things we look for. Number one, of course, we look for things like grammar, spelling, and punctuation, right? And that's what your high school English teacher maybe would have covered. But we also look for things like consistency. Are you spelling a word consistently across the book? Or are you spelling gray with an A here, but gray with an E down here? Are you using punctuation consistently? There's that little thing called the Oxford comma, right? Before and or. Are you always using it? Never using it, or using it kind of haphazardly? Do you use a comma before the word to, TOO? Do you use a comma afterwards, so, SO? Consistency is very important. In addition to just the nuts and bolts consistency, right, of grammar, spelling, and punctuation, there's consistency in your story. Did your protagonist's eye color change from the beginning of your story to the end? I've had authors who change names of characters and don't change them consistently. Have you done something in your story where you had a character go off to meet someone at Dunkin' Donuts and then you kind of forgot about them and abandoned them there? So those are things that a good editor will catch. Another thing that editors look for is unanswered questions. So this is especially important in a nonfiction book. Especially authors, you're expert, right? This inside and out and backward and forward. And sometimes it's hard to remember that your reader does not. And so I just am publishing, I just edited, I'm currently publishing an amazing memoir from a female Navy veteran who was in the Ordnance Division aboard an aircraft carrier on a 9-month deployment. It's an interesting title. It's a military expression. I'm actually writing this down so I get it right. It's if you're not ordnance, you ain't bad words. So it's IYNOYAS. And so that's going to be coming out in a few months. But the reason I bring that up is that this lady had lived her life. Like, she doesn't even really think about the fact that in the Navy, they call bathrooms heads and beds racks. And so a big part of my job was pointing out to her, Abby, let's define this word. The average reader doesn't know this. And so we created a really neat system in her book where it's actually her live journal that she kept while aboard the ship. And so we didn't want to define these words in the text and make speed bumps. So we're pulling out those definitions at the bottom of the pages. And so as the editor is kind of that bridge between the author and the reader. And so it's just so very, very important. Now, so I look at my job at Bright Communications is most of my authors do hire me for full publishing packages. I literally take them from finished manuscript or idea all the way down the winding road to books in their hands on Amazon and available to order everywhere books are sold. And so we're a professional publishing company. We produce top quality professional books. That is my job, I believe, is to set my authors up for success. So the challenge, though, if an author is, a la carting it, or if they're self-publishing it themselves, are you really creating something that looks as professional as those books that come off the printing presses, from those fancy buildings in New York? So the first step to selling a lot of copies is producing a book that sells. The other thing is what we talked about a little bit about that finding your niche. Is this a book? What is your audience? Very early on in my career, I'm a big Disney fan, and I was actually married, my second marriage, in Disney World. And I thought to myself, wow, why is there not a book about Disney weddings? Like, this is such a cool thing. I don't think a lot of people know you can be married in Disney World. It'd be a beautiful book. It'd be an informative book. And so I put together a proposal. This was pre-self-publishing days. This was where you generally looked for an agent who helped you find a publishing deal. I put together a proposal. I actually aligned with a lovely woman who was a wedding expert. So I was kind of the Disney expert. She was kind of the wedding expert. We thought we had a killer book idea, right? She even did get her agent. She had an agent. Her agent was on board. You know what question we forgot to ask? How many people actually get married in Disney World at Disney weddings? And when the publishers that the agent was pitching that book to asked that question, it wasn't a large enough market. So nobody would buy the book because they were like, well, how many people are going to actually buy this book? The niche was too small. Now, interestingly, today, I think Disney actually has books about Disney weddings. They do a lot more of them. This was early. But so that's a second thing. If you want to produce a book that sells, make sure that you're identifying your audience and that there's enough of them. There's enough of them out there to buy your book. And then what I love your question about becoming a best-selling author. Because yes, of course, every author in their heart of hearts would tell you that they would love to be on the New York Times bestseller list. That's so hard to do. It's all about concentrated sales in a small period of time. And those are sales in stores and on Amazon. So if you print your book in bulk and you sell 200 copies to your friends and family and little ladies of the church and people in the line at Target, those sales don't count. And so it's really difficult to make those bestseller lists. But what I tell authors is one of the wonderful things about publishing a book now is there's many ways to say you're a bestseller beyond the New York Times bestseller list, right? Amazon has your book ranking all the time. They update that hourly. So watch that carefully. Amazon, when a book first comes out, they'll award it badges for, top release in this category. If you see that, screenshot it because those numbers are not preserved anywhere and you want to save that forever because no one can take away from the fact that my CPR author that I mentioned earlier, The Rhythm of Rescue, she hit top new release in 3 categories, which I had never even heard of. Another important thing is Amazon also has bestsellers in categories, so not even just new release. And so anytime go to your book page, scroll down to the spec section, and under your overall bestseller rank, you're going to see your rank in category. And so, for instance, you might hit number one in the category of memoirs of survivor stories or something. And Amazon has hundreds, if not thousands, of those categories. So I encourage authors to expand your thinking of the word bestseller. You know, bestseller to you could simply mean you printed 250 copies and you sold them all. You know, that meant your book sold very well.
All right, Jennifer, thank you so much. So, publishing can become expensive very quickly. If an aspiring author has a limited budget, where should they spend their money and where should they absolutely not spend it?
Very good. So, very important thing I'm glad you kind of circled back on that. So, if they have a limited budget, I would for certain hire a professional editor. Oh, and you know what? I didn't get to the second thing, which is a professionally designed cover. You know, your book's cover is so important. It literally is the face of your book. We have an expression, don't judge a book by its cover, but everybody does, because what else are you going to judge a book by, right? So the job of the book's front cover is to get people interested enough that they turn that cover around and look at the back cover. The job of the back cover is to actually seal the deal and get them to buy the book. And that's true whether you're standing at a bookstore like Barnes and Noble or if you're on Amazon or bookshop.org, right? Because you see the front cover and you can click and see the back cover. You know, people think it's easy to design a book cover. It really is not. People think they can design their own book cover. They really should not. You know, it's like even people who don't work in publishing, they've been exposed to books their whole life, and they can tell when a book cover has been professionally done and when it has not. There's just that, like, je ne sais quoi about it. There's just something flat about it, or the elements are not quite right. They don't hang together well. It really, truly is an art creating a cover. You might be wondering, well, how much should I spend on my book cover? And there are companies out there. I haven't checked this out in a little while. There was one cover called 100 Covers, I think, that their thing used to be they charged $100 per cover. I don't know if they still do, but it might be something worth investigating. More often, if you're going to do the front and back cover and the template that you need to put it on, you're probably going to be in the neighborhood of $500. And that gives you many go-arounds. That gives you the discussions with the publisher or artist. If you only wanted the front cover designed, and if you came to an artist with a clear vision, and if you already had the cover art, like let's say you're doing a memoir and it's a photo of you, you'll probably pay considerably less. But you're definitely talking a couple $100. But if you consider that not having a good cover and not having a professional design cover will be detrimental to selling of your books, right? What price would you pay? The last thing that I would add about where to spend your money is I would suggest holding some money in reserve for promotion. And this is a mistake that author after author after author after author after author makes. You know, they're so excited to write their book. They're so excited to publish their book, and they don't really think about promoting their book. I think we all were brainwashed by that old Kevin Costner movie called Field of Dreams. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's a scene where some like ghost whispers to Kevin Costner about building a ball field. If you build it, they will come. Well, that's not true for publishing. If you publish a book, they will not come and buy your book unless you tell them about it. And, you know, can you do a grassroots thing yourself and get the word out yourself and promote yourself? Sure. But most people don't have that kind of time. They don't have that kind of talent, and they don't have that kind of platform. And so most authors really would do well paying for a little bit of help promoting their book. And so I recommend holding some of your budget in reserve so that you can do that.
Okay. So, for someone listening right now who has been saying, one day I'm going to write my book, what would you tell them to do this week to finally move from an idea to a finished manuscript?
Oh, that's such a good question. Okay, let me just get a bigger sense of with this hypothetical person. Does this hypothetical person already have the idea for their book and the book type they want to write? Like, do they know they want to do fiction, nonfiction? And then do they know like roughly like if fiction, okay, I know I want to write a mystery and here's the basic plot, or I know I want to write nonfiction and it's going to be about ... Is that how far along they are? They just haven't started writing.
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay. The number one thing I recommend your hypothetical person to do is find and join a writers group. So that could be a writers group in your community. That could be a writers group online. I would not necessarily just say join a Facebook writing community, but actually join a group. If you don't have one in your community, maybe start one. Go to your local library and ask them if they would have any interest in working with you to start a writers group. The reason I say this is that writing can be a very solitary activity and one that is just so plagued by doubts and fears and anxiety and stress. And you kind of need to have a little bit of a group around you to support you. And there's no one better that's going to support you through this whole process than a group of other writing friends. So I live in central Pennsylvania in a town called Lewistown, and I'm actually so excited to say I'm starting a new writers group next month. And I want to do this because I really want to support and help other writers. But the one thing that I want to do, and this is something I encourage people to do if you're starting your own group or joining one, is I want it to be inclusive of not just like early writers and not just people in the writing process, but I really hope to include people who are already published authors so that we can also talk about the other stages that a lot of writers don't like to think about, which is how am I going to promote my book? How am I going to sell my book? How am I going to make this into a business? And so that is the number one piece of advice I would give is find and join a writing group.
All right, Jennifer, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your perspective and knowledge about publishing.
It's
So
my pleasure.
finally, before you go, is there a question you wish I would have asked you that I did not ask you?
Oh, interesting. So when I was reading about your wonderful podcast and listening, I saw that you often talk a little bit about things like mindset and things like that. Is that that was something that I thought was really intriguing to me.
All right. So Jennifer, thank you so much. For those who would like to connect with you, how can they do that?
Oh, absolutely. So you can find me. My website is Bright, BRIGHT, communications with an S.net, and you'll find information about my company and our programs. And you can also email me via a comment screen. You can also email me at jennifer@brightcommunications.net. Please find me on YouTube at The Traveling Publisher, which is at the intersection of publishing and RVing. We talk about publishing and traveling. I'm also just launching two very exciting new initiatives that might interest your readers because it kind of goes to how to make your book your business. One of them is a new turnkey closing gift program where people like realtors and lenders and insurance agents and contractors, people who work with families that are just buying or building a new home, they often give a gift, a welcome home gift. Well, those can be really hard to buy. A lot of times they just don't hit the mark, or they're things that are not going to last, like candles or candy. Well, my program is actually a selection of books that they can choose from. We assemble them in a beautiful velvet box, attach a note from that agent. We do all the packing and wrapping and boxing and shipping and mailing. All the agent needs to do is tell me the address, name, and the selection of books to include. Another program I'm working on is called Our Coloring Circle, which is going to be a program where families can connect across town, across the state, across the country, across the world. And each month they will receive a unique coloring and journal page. They color and journal, the other family member colors and journals, and then you swap. And so each month, grandma gets a new coloring artwork from granddaughter or grandson in a journal, and the granddaughter and grandson do the same. And so I share those as examples for ways that you can really look beyond just books in the category of publishing. There's a lot of amazing things to publish beyond just books.
Okay, thank you so much. This has been a very, very wonderful episode. I really appreciate you taking out your time to be with us today. So it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you. You are an amazing interviewer and a gracious host, and I'm so very grateful for this opportunity.
Okay, and to my audience, if this episode is speaking to you, make sure you share it with someone out there who needs to hear this. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Bye, guys. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.